I ran that factory floor for 22 years. 22 years of sweat, attention, and pride, watching over every inch of steel and concrete. Never once a major accident on my watch. You'd figure that would count for something, some kind of shield against the tides of change, right? Turns out, all my diligence amounted to was a cardboard box and a perfunctory handshake. Name's Kenny Harmon, 59, lead foreman at Western Plains Manufacturing in Tulsa. We made the kind of equipment where there's no margin for error. Industrial valves, high-pressure systems. One mistake out there, and it's not just lost time or broken parts. It's someone's life. For over 2 decades, I was the reason 346 men and women went home safe every night. Not a number, but faces I knew, hands I shook, families I saw at the company picnic every summer. That Monday morning, Patricia from HR called me into her office. The moment I saw Leonard Wright sitting across from her, I felt a knot twist in my gut. Leonard, the new operations director, he'd been around maybe 4 months, always in a crisp shirt, not a stain or wrinkle, just numbers and protocols. He had that look, the kind upper management gets when they're about to do something they know is going to hurt someone else, but their own hands will never get dirty. He never really set foot on the floor except for that one safety tour, nodding at the machines like exhibits in a museum. "Kenny, we're making some operational changes," Patricia said, pushing a folder my way. Her voice was soft, but she didn't meet my eyes. Leonard started his speech about market pressures, global competition, efficiency. Words that sound harmless until you realize they're about to upend your life. I opened the folder. Severance details, pension chopped into 2 parts. 2 weeks to train my replacement. The company logo at the top looked foreign. They'd changed it last year when corporate rebranded, and no one thought to tell us. The ones who actually made the product. "Your replacement starts tomorrow," Patricia said, like she was reading off a lunch menu. Jason Weber, business degree from OSU. Very promising. I just stared at the wood grain of the table, trying to process it all. 22 years. Not one major accident. Not even a close call. I'd built the safety systems from scratch, written the manuals, run drills until muscle memory kicked in. I trained every supervisor and lead technician since 2002. All that, and I was being replaced by a kid who could probably write a business plan, but wouldn't know a hot bearing from a burnout bulb. I understand. I managed to say, it's what you say when you're cornered, and you know there's no point in fighting. Leonard looked relieved, like he'd been worried I'd break down or make a scene. Patricia tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. I could tell she hated this part of the job. That night, I took the long way home, driving past the old riverfront where refineries once stood, a graveyard of smokestacks and rusted tanks. My dad had worked there before the company shipped operations south. I remembered his words, ones I'd heard 100 times. "Kenny, a man's worth is in what he builds, not what he says." That stuck with me, became the backbone of my whole career. I built more than just products at Western Plains. I built a culture of safety, a system that ran on trust and vigilance, a record no one else could touch. Now, in just 2 weeks, I was supposed to hand all that over to some kid who'd never seen a pressure vessel apart from a textbook diagram. All that legacy, reduced to training notes and a handshake. At home, I called Frank, my old friend who retired last year. "They're letting me go," I told him, my voice flat. "Bastards," he said right away. "You gonna fight it?" "No," I said. "What's the point?" Frank swore a little, but he understood. The truth is, you can't teach what I know in 2 weeks. You can't teach the way you listen to a machine, the way you sense when the air is too dry, or the floor is a touch slicker than usual. I stare at my work boots by the door, caked with years of oil and dust, soles worn smooth on the edges. I thought about the times I'd walk that floor at 3 a.m., checking on the night shift, making sure every alarm was working, every lockout verified. They have no idea what they're losing, not just a foreman, but the memory and muscle that keep things running right. I started at Western Plains when Ethan was barely a year old. Jennifer and I were still figuring out how to be parents, still dreaming about the future. That job was more than a paycheck. It was the bedrock under our lives, health insurance, a steady schedule, a promise that if I worked hard, things would get better. I began on 3 shifts a week, hustling from one station to another, soaking up everything from the old-timers. 3 years in, I made supervisor. 7 years after that, I moved up to assistant foreman, then finally took Jack's spot when he retired. The floor became my second home. I could tell which press was running just by the note in its hum. I could smell when hydraulic fluid was past its prime, see a safety risk before it became an incident. Jennifer used to tease me, said I cared more about that factory than our own home. After she left, packed up Ethan and moved to Colorado. 10 years ago, I guess I did. I buried myself in work, let the job fill the cracks. Holidays, weekends, blizzards when half the crew stayed home. I was always there, making sure the place ran safe. The company changed hands twice in my time. Midwest Industrial took over in 2011, and for a while, things stayed the same. We kept our routines, kept the maintenance up, kept the machines humming. It wasn't until Axiom Partners bought us in 2020 that things really shifted. Private equity, guys in suits with eyes on spreadsheets, not people. Their first move was to cut maintenance budgets. Suddenly, we had to stretch every dollar, make old parts last longer, make do with less. They brought in temps, let go of my best mechanics, and started pushing quotas every quarter, like you could squeeze more out of a machine just by wishing it. Then, 6 months ago, Leonard Wright arrived. MBA, young, eager, blind to the realities of the floor. His first week, he called a meeting. We're implementing new performance tracking across all departments. Data-driven decision-making is the future, he said, as if numbers on a screen could replace experience. Afterward, Diego, my lead machinist, pulled me aside. Kenny, this guy's trouble. He asked if we could cut corners on the lockout procedure to save time. I told Diego we'd manage, like we always did, but the signs kept coming. Leonard stopped showing up for safety reviews, ignored my emails about overdue maintenance, slashed the training budget again and again. Then came 3 junior supervisors, fresh out of college, full of theories but not a shred of practical sense. Do we really need full diagnostics after every shift? One asked me. These daily inspections seem excessive, said another. They just don't get it. They see safety as an expense, not an investment. Experience as something you can buy off a shelf. What none of them realize is that a place like Western Plains doesn't run on numbers alone. It runs on the instinct and habits built over decades, the way a seasoned worker's hand moves to shut off a valve before a sensor even blinks. It's in the way we look out for each other, the way I trained every man and woman to watch their step, to double-check every lockout, to trust their ears and their gut. You can't download that kind of knowledge, and you can't replace it with a spreadsheet. Now, as I stare at 2 weeks left in a lifetime of lessons no one seems to want, I can't help but wonder what will happen when the numbers fail, and there's no one left who remembers how things should be done. Maybe they'll learn the hard way. Maybe, someday, they'll remember there was once a time when 346 people went home safe every night, and someone made sure of it. The manual just says to check things once a week. I remember first time I read that, flipping to the pages, thinking, that can't be enough. It felt like trusting a locked door in a storm. You want to believe, but something in your gut tells you to double-check. So I started keeping my own records, not because anyone asked, but because I couldn't shake the feeling that someday someone will want to know what really happened here. I noted every inspection, every odd sound in the machines, every small repair that never made it onto official forms. I snapped photos of frayed wires and oil stains, kept a log of who said, "What about safety issues?" I told myself it was just for peace of mind, but deep down, I knew I was building a defense. All the little things we did, the ways we bent the rules to keep things running right. Proof that the place was cared for. I just never thought I'd need it so soon, or that I'd be out the door with barely a warning. Then they brought in Jason Weber. He arrived on a Monday morning, his shoes polished, so bright you could have used them as a mirror. He was young, 28, maybe 29, fresh out of business school, I guessed, with that slick back hair and a tie that probably cost more than my boots. He held his tablet like a shield, already scrolling through numbers as he shook my hand. "I'm really excited to learn from you before I take over," he said. giving me a firm textbook handshake. I've already reviewed all the production metrics. I think I've identified some efficiency opportunities. I just handed him a pair of steel-toed boots, safety glasses, and told him we'd start with a tour of the floor. Metrics could wait. Out here, you learn with your ears and nose, not from a spreadsheet. For 2 weeks, he was my shadow. I took him everywhere, showed him how we scheduled maintenance, explained the logic behind our safety protocols, walked him through the personnel files, so he'd know who was who. I introduced him to every supervisor, every operator, every old hand who kept this place humming. But after a few days, I noticed something. Jason was always jotting notes on his tablet, recording the workflow processes, but he never really looked at the people. He never asked Diego about his son who just joined the Marines, never remembered that Alicia needed a little extra break time for her diabetes. He didn't understand that the number 2 milling machine needed coaxing on cold mornings, or that Russell on night shift was the only one who knew how to reset the old control panel after blackout. It's one thing to know the process, another to understand the heartbeat of place. On my last Thursday, I was grabbing my coffee in the break room when I overheard Jason talking to Leonard. Once we implement the new shift schedule, we can probably consolidate 2 of the maintenance positions, Jason was saying. And that safety redundancy Kenny insists on for the hydraulic press. The manual doesn't require those extra checks. Leonard nodded, grinning. Exactly the fresh perspective we needed. They didn't see me standing there. I just stood for a moment, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. I realized then that they weren't just saving a few bucks. They were dismantling the safety net I'd spent years weaving. The little routines and double checks that kept people's hands safe, kept machines from tearing themselves apart, kept us all going home at the end of the day. That afternoon, after the shift ended, I called Diego, Alicia, Sam from maintenance, and Russell from night shift. We met in the parking lot, the air heavy with the smell of oil and dust. They're going to start cutting corners, I told them, voice low. And the new guy doesn't even know what he doesn't know. He's got all the answers, but he doesn't have the questions. Diego looked worried. What do you want us to do, Kenny? Management's not going to listen to us. I nodded. No, they won't. But you can keep your own records, just like I did. If something goes wrong, equipment issues, safety problems, don't call management. Call me. I handed out index cards with my number, pressing them into their hands like lifelines. My last day, I packed up my locker, photos, old gloves, a couple keepsakes. Jason was already at my desk, rearranging things, making it his own. I handed him my keys. Any last advice? He asked, eyes glued to his tablet. Yeah, I said. Listen to the floor. The machines will talk to you if you pay attention. He just smiled, distracted, missing the point entirely. I walked out. No balloons, no cake. Just a handshake from Patricia in HR and a parking lot badge that blinked red as soon as I tried to use it. 22 years, and that was it. But I couldn't just let it go. Western Plains was in my blood. Even if they thought they were done with me, I waited restless, checking my phone more than I'd admit. 3 weeks later, Diego called, his voice a whisper. They're changing the maintenance schedule on the hydraulic presses, he said, probably hiding in the supply closet, going from weekly to every 2 weeks. Document everything. I told him. Write down every change. Pressure drops, leaks, anything odd. He agreed, sounding nervous but determined. 2 days after that, Sam called. My parts order for the backup generator got denied. Management says we can wait until the quarterly inventory. I logged every call, every skip step, every time they ignored the procedures that kept the place safe. By week 4, I'd had enough. I sent an email to Leonard and Patricia. I kept it professional, but I laid it out plainly. I'd heard about the changes to maintenance and safety. I offered to consult, to explain the risks. Patricia replied within an hour, "Thank you for your concern, Kenny. The transition has been smooth and Jason has implemented several efficiency improvements already. We'll reach out if we need your insight." It was a polite dismissal, and I could read between the lines. Stay out of it. 6 weeks in, the first accident happened. It was minor, just a belt slipping off a number 3 press. 2 hours of downtime. No injuries. But it got me thinking. The next week, there was a small hydraulic leak. Week 8, 3 separate electrical issues cropped up in 1 week. Russell called each time, his frustration obvious. The new guy is blaming the equipment, says it's outdated and poorly maintained. That cut deep. Those machines were old, sure, but they ran like clockwork if you respected them, if you listened. By week 10, I couldn't stand it. I drove to the plant at lunchtime, parked where I could watch the doors. When Diego came outside, I flagged him over. How bad is it really? I asked. He glanced around, nervous. Bad? Production's down 15%. Morale's worse. People are scared to speak up. Machines are acting up, and they're rushing repairs to keep up with the schedule. Everyone's watching their backs. He paused, eyes tired. It's not the place it was, Kenny. Feels like nobody's listening anymore. Standing there in the parking lot, I felt a mix of anger and sadness. It wasn't just about the numbers or the accidents or even the jobs lost. It was about the trust we'd built over decades. Trust in each other, in the process, in the idea that if you did things right, you get to go home safe at the end of the day. I realized then that what we'd built could unravel faster than I ever imagined. And that maybe, just maybe, it was up to us to hold the line, even if the people in charge had forgotten what really kept the place running. They let Sam go last week. No warning. Just called him into the office and told him he wasn't adapting, wasn't forward-thinking enough. The truth was, Sam knew the plant inside and out. He'd been running maintenance longer than Jason's been shaving. But that didn't matter to management. They wanted someone they could control, someone who wouldn't ask questions. So now Jason has filled Sam's shoes with his old college buddy, a guy who'd never worked a day in heavy manufacturing before. The first time I watched him on the floor, he confused a torque wrench for a screwdriver, tried to adjust a motor with the wrong tool, and acted like it was all a joke. I remember standing there, thinking, this can't be happening. How long until someone gets hurt? That's what I lose sleep over, knowing all it takes is one careless mistake for things to go sideways. So far, we dodged disaster, but it was close. Just a few days after Sam left, Russell nearly lost a hand when the safety switch failed on the cutting line. The machine didn't stop like it was supposed to, and if Russell hadn't yanked his arm out in time, he'd be down a limb. Jason shrugged it off, blamed operator error, and moved on. That's when I realized I couldn't just stand by. I'd spent my whole career trying to keep this place safe, and now it felt like all that work was being undone overnight. I still had a few friends at the State Industrial Safety Board, people I trusted who care about more than just checking boxes. The next morning, I made the call. I laid it all out for Helen Barnes, the inspector, my history with the plant, the way things had changed since the new management came in, my fears that cost-cutting was putting lives at risk. She listened carefully, asked questions, took notes. We'll be there, unannounced, within the next 2 weeks, she promised. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe the system would work. Maybe, if someone outside saw what was happening, things would have to change. But hope didn't last long. 3 days later, I got a call from Diego, another old friend who'd been at Western Plains almost as long as me. Kenny, they know, he said, his voice shaking. Somebody tipped off management that you called the safety board. Leonard's tearing the place apart. What's happening? I asked, my pulse pounding. They've got us working double shifts, scrubbing the plant top to bottom, rewriting maintenance logs, shutting down production lines to patch up anything that looks bad. Everyone's exhausted and on edge. It's like they're trying to erase every trace of trouble before the inspectors show up. A few hours later, a courier showed up at my front door with a thick envelope. Inside was a letter from Western Plains Legal Department, accusing me of interfering with business operations and breaching confidentiality. They threatened a lawsuit if I continued spreading false information about the company. I called my lawyer, Bill Henderson, and handed over the letter. He read it, then looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and frustration. They're bluffing about the NDA, he said. You haven't shared any trade secrets or confidential information, just concerns about safety. But they could still drag this out, make your life hell in court if they want to. I asked if they could somehow stop the inspection. He shook his head. No. Once the safety board is involved, it's out of their hands. But you need to watch your back, Kenny. Companies like this, they don't play fair when they feel cornered. I hung up, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. It was so clear they wanted to silence me, make me regret ever speaking up. At the same time, they were frantically patching over the problems I'd spent years trying to fix, scrambling to fool the inspectors. But it was all surface level, a performance. I knew that as soon as the spotlight faded, they'd be right back to cutting corners. Only this time they'd be more careful to cover their tracks. I realized I couldn't just rely on one inspection to bring about real change. I needed something bigger, something undeniable, a record of the pattern, proof that this wasn't a one-off mistake, but a calculated risk they were willing to take with people's lives. The inspection finally happened. Helen Barnes and her team showed up unannounced, just like she promised. They walked the lines, checked the logs, talked to the crew. When it was over, Western Plains technically passed, but by the skin of their teeth. Helen called me afterwards. They fixed the immediate dangers, she told me, but I flagged a lot of issues in my report. The maintenance logs don't add up, and your co-workers sounded like they'd been coached on what to say. I flagged it for follow-up, but the penalties will just be slaps on the wrist unless something bigger comes out. I thanked her, but I could hear the defeat in her voice. She'd seen this before. Companies gaming the system, playing the inspection like a chess match. Pay a fine, promise to do better, then slide right back into old habits. That weekend, just as I was starting to wonder if I'd made any difference at all, my doorbell rang. Russell stood there, shoulders hunched, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Sorry to show up out of the blue, Kenny, but I couldn't risk bringing this to the plant. He handed me a thumb drive. What's this? I asked, already guessing what it might be. Everything, he said. The real maintenance logs, the fake ones they made up for the inspection, and emails between Leonard and corporate. It goes back over a year. They've been planning these cuts, targeting anyone who'd push back on safety. They wanted you gone so they could do what they wanted. We sat at my kitchen table, laptops open, hour after hour sifting through the files. The deeper we dug, the worse it got. This wasn't just some manager trying to save a few bucks. It was a deliberate, top-down strategy, / safety and maintenance budgets, except that accidents would increase and gamble that insurance and minor fines would be cheaper than actually keeping the place safe. I found an email from an Axiom Partners executive, one of the investors backing Western Plains, spelling it out in black and white. Insurance covers accidents. Missing our quarterly targets costs us investors. Prioritize accordingly. My hands shook as I read it. They weren't just ignoring the risks. They were coldly calculating them. Choosing profits over people, over the men and women I'd worked beside for more than 2 decades. There's more, Russell said, his voice grim as he pulled up another folder. Jason knows the equipment's failing. Look at these maintenance requests he's denied. The list was long, and each request told a story. Critical safety parts left unreplaced, backup systems postponed, preventive repairs ignored. Every single one stamped. Defer to next quarter per budget constraints. It was a litany of near misses, potential disasters, all sacrificed for the sake of a better-looking balance sheet. I looked at Russell, the weight of it all pressing down on me. Why are you showing me this? I asked. You know you're risking your job, maybe worse. He stared back, eyes red from lack of sleep. Alicia's nephew got hurt yesterday. Press guard failed. Same one Jason said wasn't critical. Kid's 19. Lost 2 fingers. They're blaming him, Kenny, making him sign papers while he's still on pain meds, so he can't sue. It's not right. Someone has to do something. My fists clenched on the table. They can't get away with this. They already are, Russell said, and it's going to keep happening, unless we stop them. After he left, I sat alone, the evidence spread out before me. I could hear the voices of the people I'd worked with all these years, guys who trusted me, who just wanted to do their jobs and get home safe to their families. I thought about Sam, about Alicia's nephew, about all the near misses we'd had that never made it into the reports. None of these people were statistics. They were fathers, sons, mothers, daughters. Real people with lives and futures that depended on someone caring enough to fight for them. The reality was, Western Plains had become a place where dollars mattered more than lives, where the people at the top were willing to roll the dice with other people's safety to hit their numbers. I realized then that I couldn't just go back to normal, not after what I'd seen. I needed to make sure the truth came out, not just for me or Russell, but for everyone who counted on that plant to do right by them. I didn't know exactly how I'd do it yet, but I knew I couldn't look the other way. Not anymore. I picked up my phone to call the safety board again, my thumb hovering over the contact. For a moment, I nearly went through with it, but something in me balked. What good would another inspection do? Western Plains had the routine down to a science by now. They'd spent a week scrubbing, patching, making everything look as clean as a whistle. Then the inspectors would come, slap them with another fine, just the cost of doing business, really, and nothing would change. They'd keep right on with their shortcuts and cover-ups. Same as always. I set the phone down, feeling a familiar frustration twist in my gut. No, I told myself. This time, it had to be different. I couldn't just keep playing their game. So I started making calls to people I trusted, people who'd seen the inside of the plant long enough to know the difference between the official story and reality. Diego answered on the first ring, his voice tight with worry. Alicia was cautious, but agreed to hear me out. I called 6 others, each one someone I'd worked alongside, sweated through double shifts with, watched as management passed them over for promotions in favor of yes men. We agreed to meet at Frank's house the next evening. Frank didn't mind. He said his place was neutral ground, and we could talk without worrying about eyes or ears from the company. The next day, after everyone had filed in and settled on Frank's battered old couches, I laid all out. I told him exactly what I'd found, and what Russell, God rest his stubborn soul, had passed on to me. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I showed them the files, the photos, the list of failures swept under the rug. When I finished, there was a heavy silence in the room, the kind that weighs on your chest. Diego was the first to speak. So, what do we do? Go to the media? Let them blow it up? I shook my head. Not yet. If we go public too soon, Western Plains will just spin the story. Call us disgruntled. Say we're exaggerating. We need leverage, something they can't ignore or brush aside. I looked around the room, catching everyone's eyes. We need proof that hits where it matters. Alicia leaned forward, elbows on her knees. What kind of leverage are you talking about, Kenny? The kind that hits their bottom line. I replied, I need records. Real documentation. Not just rumor. Every shortcut you see, every time they skip a check or ignore a near miss, I want it documented and dated. Photos if you can get them. Anything that shows a pattern, not just a one-off. Frank frowned, worry creasing his brow. They catch anyone collecting that stuff, they'll fire us on the spot. Maybe worse. I nodded. That's why we need to be careful. We don't take risks we don't have to. No heroics, no getting caught. We play it smart and we play it patient. I'm not asking anyone to do this alone. I looked around at the faces in the room. These were people who'd given years, decades in some cases, to Western Plains. People with families, who deserved more than being treated like replaceable cogs. Give me 2 weeks, I said. Just 2 weeks to pull this together. In the meantime, keep your eyes open. Watch your backs. And please stay safe. The next 2 weeks felt like living in the shadows. I didn't go near the plant. But thanks to Diego and the others, my presence was felt all the same. Every day my phone buzzed with messages, shift logs, notes on breakdowns, covert photos of corroded pipes and jury-rigged repairs. They documented everything. Machines that should have been shut down still running. Safety protocols skipped to meet quotas. Near misses swept under the rug. I cataloged it all, building a case so solid even Western Plains high-priced lawyers would have trouble picking it apart. But gathering evidence was just one part of the plan. Quietly, carefully, I made 3 big moves to make sure our case couldn't be ignored or buried. First, I reached out to George Lawson. He used to be one of my best clients back in the day, before he moved up to Meridian Energy Solutions, Western Plains' biggest customer. I invited him to a diner just down the highway from the plant, a place with strong coffee and no prying ears. Kenny, Good to see you, George said, shaking my hand with a grip that felt reassuringly solid. I was starting to wonder where you'd gotten to. I smiled, but there wasn't much warmth in it. Forced retirement, I told him. But that's not why I called. I need to show you something. I slid a folder across the table. Photos of faulty pressure valves, all stamped with shipping labels from the last month. These all pass inspection, George, according to the new process. He flipped through the photos, brow furrowing deeper with each one. You're telling me these went out to Meridian? Some already have, I said quietly. They cut corners, George. It's only a matter of time before something fails and someone gets hurt. I couldn't let that happen without trying to stop it. He set the folder down, his expression grave. This is serious, Kenny. Meridian's been with them for 30 years, but if safety's at risk, that changes everything. All I'm asking is that you push for your own quality audit. Don't take their word for it. Check for yourself. He nodded slowly. I'll see what I can do. If even half of this is true, we'll have to act. Second, I went back to Helen Barnes at the safety board. This time, I didn't just bring complaints. I brought evidence. Dates, times, photos, logs. Enough detail that they couldn't just wave me off or file it away for later. Helen looked over the stack, her expression turning from skepticism to concern. This is much more than what you brought last time, she said. I'll have to show this to my supervisor. It's going to trigger a formal investigation. I understand, I said. Just, please, keep my name out of it for now. You know how these things go. She nodded, eyes still scanning the evidence. We'll do what we can. This is serious, Kenny. The third move was the riskiest of all. I reached out to Jason Weber. He'd taken over my old job as floor manager, and from what I'd heard, management hadn't given him much of a chance. I suggested we meet for lunch, well away from the plant, in a place too public for anyone to try anything stupid. Jason showed up looking like he hadn't slept in days. His shirt was wrinkled, collar askew, dark circles under his eyes. He dropped into the seat across from me, rubbing his temples. Thanks for coming, I said after we ordered. How's the floor holding up? He gave a bitter laugh. It's a mess. Machines break down every week. Corporate just keeps pushing for higher numbers, but half the line's falling apart. I'm supposed to hit quotas with equipment held together by duct tape and hope. They didn't tell you what you were walking into, did they? I asked. They said you were set in your ways, that the plant needed modernization. But every time I fix one thing, 3 more go wrong. I'm drowning. I nodded. It's because they tore out the support system. Those maintenance schedules you cut, they weren't busy work. They kept us running and they kept people safe. Leonard says we can't afford that much downtime for maintenance, Jason muttered. So how's the budget looking now? With production dropping and quality complaints piling up? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The answer was written all over his face. Listen, Jason, I said, lowering my voice. I didn't call you here to rub your nose in it. But in about 2 weeks, things are going to change. Meridian's going to demand a full quality audit. The safety board's coming back for a surprise inspection. And all the evidence I've gathered is about to land on some very important desks, including the ones at corporate headquarters. He stiffened, eyes narrowing. Are you threatening me? No, I said quietly. I'm giving you a choice. You can wait for the fallout and take the blame as the manager who couldn't keep things together. Or you can start documenting everything you've been forced to do. The denied maintenance requests, the ignored safety reports, all of it. Show them it wasn't your call. He stared at his plate, hands clenched. If they find out I'm keeping records, I'll be out the door. Maybe, I said, but you'll have done the right thing. And maybe, just maybe, someone's life depends on it. You have a chance to protect people, Jason. Think about what that means. I slid my card across the table. You've got 1 week. If you're in, let me know what you can do. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a text from Jason. I'm in. What do you need from me? It wasn't a victory yet, but for the first time in a long while, I felt something like hope. The pieces were finally coming together. This time, I thought, we might actually have a chance to break the cycle. For the workers, for the plant, and for everyone who'd ever been told to just keep their head down and take it. This time, maybe we could win. We've been teetering on the edge for months, watching cracks spread. Every shortcut, every misinspection, every warning ignored by Western Plains upper management. All it needed was one last, decisive shove to send the whole operation tumbling over. Something big enough that even the people in their corner offices, so far removed from the oily clang and hum the plant floor, would be forced to confront the mess they'd made. Sure enough, as if fate itself was tired of waiting, that final push came the very next day. The #1 hydraulic press, the beating heart of our entire production line, didn't just fail. It went out in a blaze of fury. Steel shrieked, alarms blared, and the press ground to a dead, shuddering halt, silencing the whole factory. You could feel the shock ripple through the building. Thank God nobody was hurt. But with the press down, the entire operation froze in place. For the first time in years, the vast, noisy plant was silent, a giant brought to its knees. That was the instant when everything boiled over. I was jolted awake at 6:15 a.m. by the insistent buzzing of my phone. No assistant, no foreman. Leonard Wright himself, the site manager, was calling me directly. The fatigue and panic in his voice were impossible to miss. "Kenny, we got a situation at the plant." I stifled a yawn and tried to sound unfazed. "Yeah, I heard." Shutdown news hit the group chat before midnight. Even half asleep, I couldn't help but let a little sarcasm slip in. Leonard didn't bother with niceties. "We need your expertise. The main press is down, production's at a standstill, and customer orders are already piling up. Maintenance is stumped." I couldn't help myself. "That's because you fired Sam, the only guy who could keep that press alive for 15 years. He exhaled, the sound heavy and frustrated. "Can we set that aside for now? The company wants you back in as a consultant. No strings attached. Just get us out of this hole." I let him sweat a moment, listening to the desperation behind his words. $300 an hour. Cash. No questions about how you do it. Just get it running by week's end. He finally offered. I nearly laughed, not because of the money, but because money was never the real issue. "I'll be there in an hour," I replied. "But I have conditions. I bring in my team, Diego, Russell, and Alicia. I get full authority on repairs and parts orders, no interference. And I want every maintenance record from the last 6 months unfiltered." He hesitated, but the situation had him cornered. "Fine. Whatever it takes," he said, resignation thick in his voice. When I arrived, the place was a disaster zone. Operators milled around in anxious clusters, the air heavy with tension. Managers huddled in glass-walled offices, faces drawn and voices low. And there, dominating production floor, was the press, silent, hulking, its failure choking the lifeblood out of everything around it. Jason, one of the senior operators, found me as soon as I walked in. "Thank God you're here, Kenny. It's worse than I thought." "Show me," I said, not wasting a second. We moved quickly, my team close behind, weaving through knots of nervous workers. Diagnosis didn't take long. The press was a mess. Multiple points of failure, each one the result of weeks, even months of deferred maintenance. Worn seals, overtaxed bearings, lubrication schedules skipped to shave a few hours off the books. Exactly what I'd warned about in meeting after meeting, only to be told to work smarter, not harder. Leonard hovered nearby, anxiety etched into every line of his face. I turned, fixing him with a stare. "I can fix this, but there's something you need to see first." I pulled out my phone, opened my email, and tapped send. I just forwarded a full report to the Axiom Partners execs, the state's safety board, and Meridian Energy Solutions. Every violation, every shortcut, every risk that's been swept under the rug since the policy changes. It's all in there, with photos, logs, and statements from the floor. Leonard's face drained of color. "You can't do that. You'll bring the whole company down." "It's already done," I said. "Now, do you want this press fixed, or do you want to keep pretending it's not your problem?" The next 3 days were a blur of sweat, grit, and late nights. My team and I practically lived on the shop floor, stripping down the press, replacing every compromised part, recalibrating systems that should have been overhauled months ago. There's a strange satisfaction in restoring a machine like that, a kind of redemption, not just for hardware, but for everyone who'd been ignored and overruled. Meanwhile, Western Plains was under siege. Meridian Energy, our biggest customer, froze all new orders and demanded a full review before resuming shipments. The state's safety board descended, this time determined to dig deeper. Even Axiom partners, usually content to watch from their high-rise conference rooms, sent a corporate audit team to pick through every process, every record, every inch of the plant. By the end of the third day, the dominoes had fallen. Leonard was quietly reassigned, shipped off to corporate headquarters. No farewell party, no speeches. Jason stayed, but the chain of command had shifted. Now he answered to Thomas Whitfield, a lean, sharp-eyed operations director sent from the parent company to clean house. Once the press was humming again, Thomas called me into his office, a glass-walled space overlooking the factory floor. "Impressive work," he said, his tone equal parts respect and relief. "Your documentation was first-rate. Corporates read every word. We're overhauling maintenance and safety across all our facilities. And we want you to head up the new era as Director of Manufacturing Operations for Western Plains." I took a moment to consider. What's the offer? He named a figure, 30% above anything I'd ever earned, plus broad authority over maintenance and safety, as long as I kept within the budget. I shook my head. That's the problem. Safety can't be managed quarter to quarter or crammed into whatever's left after everyone else gets their slice. It has to be non-negotiable. I stood, hesitated, and looked him in the eye. "I'll consult 3 days a week at my rate. I'll help you rebuild the systems, train the teams, get production back on track. But I'm not putting my name on the door again, not unless things really change." He nodded, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "Deal." I didn't return for a title or to pad my bank account. I went back for Diego, Alicia, and Russell, for every operator in tech who deserved a workplace where they weren't gambling with their lives for a paycheck. I went back to restore the pride and safety I'd spent 22 years building piece by piece before it all fell apart. That next Monday, stepping onto the floor, I could feel the difference, not just in the machines, but in the people. There was a new energy, a sense of hope and respect. The constant edge of fear had faded, replaced by cautious optimism. As the press cycled up, humming steady and strong, I realized the plant itself was breathing easier, like it knew its caretaker had come home to set things right. Sometimes you fix a machine. Sometimes you fix the soul of a place. This time, I was determined to do both.